So right from the book of Genesis, sometimes I know here in Africa we are used to saying this is an African. That you know this is something that is out there in the West or probably in the East or other cultures. But I don't think that's factual. It is actually human because of sin. Homosexuality has been with humanity ever since creation. Okay? And that's something very important for you to first get it. And so I would like to list a number of differences so that you are able to engage and know how to respond. One is that homosexuality, like I've said, has been there since creation. However, the LGBTQ is actually a collection of ideas, arguments, and thoughts that have been galvanized around human sexuality. And probably 1897, 1950, you have the Matter Chain Society, you have different groups in different countries coming up. But I think the current modern expression comes from an incident where gay people had been gathered in New York and there was an attack in a club where they were. Then there were protests, and out of that protest, normally known as a Stonewall, they came together in a bid to protect themselves from that kind of an attack. And it moved and started mutating from the original of their practice, and now it became a human rights issue, where we are saying these people are minority, they are being discriminated on the basis of sexual orientation, and therefore they need our protection. That kind of thinking. So we can trace that from 1969 when that incident happened, and there was a lot of now development that has happened ever since, and to have the expression that we have today. Homosexuality is a specific sin of sexual activity with the same gender or with the same sex. However, the LGBTQ is a range of sexual sin. It could combine sin with people, sin with animals, sin with objects. There are quite a number of different expressions of sexual activity. So that's something different. The third difference is that one can be ignorantly a homosexual. In other words, you have not developed any argument to defend your sin. You are just sinning. You know the way you have a sin without a logical defense on why you commit that sin. You just commit the sin. But the LGBTQ is an ideology. So you cannot be part of that movement until you have believed their assertions. So you could be committing the sin of homosexuality, but as a member of the LGBTQ community, you have also believed the assertions, the arguments, and the thinking and the thought patterns. The other thing is, a number of people who commit sexual sin of homosexuality, they are ashamed about it. But within the LGBTQ community, they take pride in their sin. You may find a thief who is ashamed of their habit of stealing, or somebody who tells lies, but they can't help it. They are ashamed that they do that. And we too are ashamed of our sinfulness, isn't it? Meaning you do not project your expression of sin. But the LGBTQ is a movement, an ideology to take pride in that kind of behavior. So you find that as a difference. Okay? The other one is that everyone who can be called a homosexual is actually committing the sin of homosexuality. But you can't be in the LGBTQ movement without committing those specific sin. You can actually be one who is a sympathizer to the thinking of the movement, of thinking, oh, they are being mistreated. Oh, I don't think that's been fair. In other words, you may not be yourself practicing, meaning you could be someone who's married with children, but you're supporting the ideology. because it's a set of arguments. It's a way of thinking. It's a worldview. It's a pattern of thought. And therefore, you can be part of the movement without necessarily practicing the sin. Now, with those few differences, I hope in your response on campus, when you either get a student or you hear students having conversations about it, it is very important to have those two distinctions. Because again, when you do not know something which is human to us, we have a blanket thinking about whatever we don't clearly understand, isn't it? And we develop certain stereotypes of something that we don't fully understand. However, the more you think about it and the more you have conversations with people within it, then you gain clarity and you're able to see certain small differences that helps you to engage much more effectively. Let me move that by talking about what are the different pathways that a number of students on campus would find themselves as part of the LGBTQ movement. And I'm going to point out a number of them. Number one is what I would call the experimentation pathway. Experimentation pathway would make reference to when all of us are growing up and are kind of starting to discover our own bodies, we are generally curious. Everyone is curious. As your body changes through puberty, as you have conversations with other teenagers and other children, all of us at some point become curious about our own sexuality. However, that curiosity can be taken to a next step, where you're not just having innocent curiosity, but that's where that curiosity actually just crosses that boundary. And if that carries on, meaning you did not begin with an ideological conviction, you did not begin with a thought, you're not LGBTQ, you are doing experimentation. Now, it makes it worse when we have single-sex schools. Most of our boarding schools like this one, this is a girls' school, okay? And then you go to a boys' school. So when girls are alone and boys are alone, and it is at the same time when puberty is happening, the temptation for experimentation is very high. Now, during that phase of experimentation and unexamined curiosity, if it goes on unchecked, it can be given an argument. In other words, if you meet up with someone who's already processed the thinking, or you interact with media or any other source of information, and in your process of experimentation, if someone provides you with sufficient information, however that would be in the argument, you must start thinking, wait, maybe this is what I am. Maybe this is what I'm thinking, and we're going to come back to that and trying to think about it. And immediately someone brands you and gives you a branding or kind of calls you something which you had not yet thought about, your temptation is to go read more about it, isn't it? So you kind of are led from the experimentation to curiosity to reading and to kind of finding a bit of affirmation. Maybe. So you go through the stages of doubt. Maybe this is how I am. Okay? The second one is a human rights pathway. A second pathway is a framing of LGBTQ ideology as a human rights issue. And this causes a bit of confusion for many of us, because most of the people who are proponents of protecting people who are being discriminated as a justice issue, it is very easy for us to understand it, because it is one thing to be empathetic towards someone who's been mistreated by society and been discriminated and treated unfairly, but it is another thing for you, on account of your empathy to believe in their thoughts. I can be empathetic with you without believing your arguments. I can be empathetic to you as a human being, that you're being treated unfairly. But I can also lack the judgment to know that even though you're being treated fairly, you are also believing a lie. So meaning that even though I believe a lie, I shouldn't be treated unfairly. I don't know whether we are getting the argument. That empathy should not become a pathway for us to consider as though the arguments are justified. Just because there has been an unjust treatment of those who hold the LGBTQ ideology. And more often than not, especially for us who are growing up, and especially for Gen Z, your generation has a higher notch than mine on issues of justice. I think your generation hates injustice. And when you hate injustice, you may be tempted to want to defend the person who is being unjustly treated. But you also need the wisdom to ask, even though they are being mistreated, is their argument valid? So that you can protect them as a human being, because every human being would have rights before God, because we are made in the image of God. But the fact that I empathize with you as a human being doesn't believe that I necessarily need to believe in your ideology. And separating the two is very difficult for us when we are young and when our hearts are passionate for justice. The third pathway is a pathway of programmatic exposure. The programmatic exposure. There has been the formation and the coalescing of quite a number of movements that have pushed in lots of educational programs. I don't know how many of you have heard about the SRHR Alliance, Sexual Health and Reproductive Rights Alliance. You've heard about that? Of course, most of you are familiar with CSE, Comprehensive Sexual Education. Now, when there has been organized seminars like this one, where I'm providing you with lots and lots of information about a subject, you tend to be more knowledgeable about that subject than the opposite argument. True? Because the information and the education is made ubiquitous. It is available in very many spaces. For instance, in our own schools, there has been a great effort to integrate CSC within our learning curriculum, especially in high school, and even in our primary school education. So when you hear something so many times, your mind starts to accommodate some of those thoughts and arguments. And then later on, that is pushed by people of international repute, who now do not push it as a sexual issue. It is pushed in as a human rights issue. Then it is also pushed in as a sex education issue. So that I'll have a sexual education program that has about 60, 70, 80% very helpful information about your sexuality, but therein I also blend in LGBTQ ideology. So when you are young, it becomes very difficult to sort out this good, helpful 80% information about sexual reproductive health. Has the screen on? Okay, I'm not so sure. There becomes an opportunity for you to say, well, this information is very helpful. And truly it is. Not everything is unhelpful. It is very helpful. But at the same time, you find that how do I sort out what is helpful information and that which is a lie within the entire alliance? And the alliance is huge. SRHR Alliance in this country, I think, has over 100 organizations. and groups, working in schools, working in communities, working among youth groups, doing publications, investing in radio programs, investing in TV programs. In other words, you're constantly bombarded by so much information about this single subject until you feel you are not only overwhelmed, but your heart starts to accommodate some of the arguments. The other pathway, so now I've told you about how many pathways? 3 pathways: experimentation, human rights pathway, programmatic exposure. Now the other one is what I would call the economic vulnerability pathway. Economic vulnerability pathway. In many of our informal settlements, especially families within here in our own country that live in the lower strata of society, there is a lot of a free way of entrance of whoever can help. And one of the major issues that actually happens in our slums and in our rural areas is the entrance of NGO communities combining a number of issues: economic empowerment, you would call about family education. There are quite a number of different programs. It uses the same strategy. I'm going to give you a lot of financial information. I'm going to give you a lot of hygiene issues. I'm going to give you a lot of things. I'm going to sponsor you to school. I'm going to provide this for you. But on this larger scale, I'm also going to introduce the LGBTQ ideology within there. When you're vulnerable economically, it becomes very difficult for you to say no. You know that our governments have been held ransom by the Western governments, especially where we are getting, I would say, economic loans to run our government. And you remember our president at some point had an exchange, being asked, what are you going to do concerning the rights of the LGBTQ community within the... And then he really had to be playing safe so that you do not... He's trying to balance between, he still needs the economic help, but he's trying to say, but please don't push this down my throat. You give me financial help with no strings attached. But that's not always the case. A number of our presidents and senior government officials are really, really struggling to say no to the entire package. And so I think last month I was listening to one of the speakers who had come to a teens camp in Naivasha. And the guy works in Mukuru, one of our slums here in the city. And he explained the number of programs and NGOs running programs in the slums and the amount of LGBTQ ideology that is pushed without question. Because these are economically vulnerable communities. Number 4 is the cultural influence pathway. The cultural influence pathway, I would say this is the most powerful of all of them, because this is soft culture influence, which comes in through music, literature, film. Most of you guys love artistic expression, isn't it? So meaning music is a big deal to us when you're young and growing up. Film is a major thing for us when you're growing up. Anything that has visual arts, you will find that there's lots and lots of artists, especially of international repute. Here we will talk about even authors, very gifted and excellent in what they do. So there's absolutely no mediocrity in terms of their craft. So if it's a musician, they are very good at their music. So meaning if you listen to the kind of pieces they have put together, even you acknowledge, iyo muziki iko sawa. When you listen to the author, they are mighty on the pen. Awesome, great. When it comes to film and acting, they are gifted and they have honed their skills very well. But again, these kind of rising stars and global icons become the pathway, because once they endorse or even champion or are even empathetic to the LGBTQ ideologies, the younger people are not able to separate that I love how you sing, or I love how you act, or I love how you write well, but up to this point, I don't think you can guide me concerning my sexuality. It becomes very difficult. So in this place, in this part of the world, I mean, we have had our own share. I don't know how many of you know Binyavanga Wainaina, the late Binyavanga Wainaina. Any one of you have heard about that name? Oh, he's a writer of an older generation. He had won the Kane Prize for writing. His novels are known globally. He's such a gifted guy, but he was among the first people to come out. Come out is like a phrase within the LGBTQ community, to saying that the boldness to actually speak about what you think in your heart. And Binyavanga was at one point, he narrates in a TED Talk, when he had been invited to go speak, Mangu High School had invited him to go in as a role model in one of the, what do you call them? The kind of motivational talks that sometimes you get invited to go back to your high school to motivate the current students. And Mangu is a Catholic school. And he had just come out as a homosexual, like I think 2 or 3 months before. And then Mangu High School invites him. And then the Cardinal Njue gets to know about it when he was already in the school waiting to head the podium. It was a crisis. And this is an internationally renowned guy. So it affirmed the narrative that, wait, we are being oppressed. Wait, we are being denied opportunities. We are being discriminated. And for younger minds and younger youth who love music, who love film, who love art, who love the spoken word, it becomes extremely difficult to separate the two. To know that I can appreciate your artistic excellence and your giftings, but I can separate that from your ideology and thoughts. I mean, you've seen our own artists who do cross-dressing. I mean, I had all those images popped up. I don't know why Satan really made this difficult for us to have all the slides. I had done like 57 slides. Maybe it's God's way of humbling me. You remember we had this group called Sauti Soul? You remember Willis Chiman? I mean, Sauti Soul are a phenomenon. Their music is amazing, let's be honest. But when Willis comes out and says that he is gay, what did you do? So do you stop loving the music? It's tempting. It's challenging, isn't it? Because you love the music, but then this guy is saying this, isn't it? When you have artists like Eric Omondi cross-dressing, so sometimes they are giving gifts to a poor community and doing an act of kindness. The next time they are dressed like a woman. The next time they are singing. I mean, how do you separate what is happening in your mind? I mean, when Bahati dresses like a woman and you had loved his music before, what do you normally do? Do you stop listening to his music? I'm asking you what you normally do. I'm not asking you what you would do. I'm asking what do you normally do? How do you separate in your heart and mind that different path? How do you do that? It takes a lot of wisdom. It takes a lot of wisdom to say, I appreciate your gifting. I think you're very, very excellent in your craft. But when it comes to this matter, you do not have authority to guide me on it. And in marketing uses the icons and the celebrities of our age to be able to move masses towards a certain product, isn't it? Now, when that same celebrity speaks about a moral issue, what do? Do you have the maturity to separate those two and say, wait, I love your music, you're awesome. Your spoken word is amazing. Clock it, isn't it? My daughters were telling me, clock it. I had no idea what that means. And then, but I'm able to say, wait, I don't think I'll follow you on that path. I love your music, but you can't guide me when it comes to family. I love your music, but you can't guide me when it comes to money. I love this, but it doesn't mean that when you're a celebrity that you gain authority in all of life. A celebrity is only good at only one thing, the thing you know them for. So do not be foolish enough to follow them in all of life. Even politicians, they probably are only good at one single thing, how to shout loudest and mobilize people. But their life, the entirety of their life, probably cannot be emulated. And now that you've gone to the university, please educate your younger brothers and sisters to learn how to separate the power of soft culture. So that when you see a footballer playing the Premier League, and then the next day you want to dress the way they dress off the pitch. So tell them, wait. I love your football skills, but my dress code is mine. I won't follow you into dressing the way you dress, even though I love your football skills. The other one is the personal heart pathway. The personal heart pathway, which is the sixth pathway in which majority of the students. Now, why am I teaching you and talking about these pathways? Because you will need to discern which pathway has the highest influence in the student you're having conversation with. How did they get where they are and to have the kind of arguments that they are having? The personal heart, again, I think it is the most emotionally compelling pathway because it brings in personal pain. And personal pain is so deep and so personal that whoever gives you an argument or a reason to either explain your own situation, you would easily accept it. Whatever justifies what you're feeling within your heart. Many young people who gravitate towards LGBTQ ideology have histories marked with deep wounds, abandonment, divorce of the parents, emotional neglect, verbal abuse, sexual abuse sometimes, exposure to immorality within the home or even within the church. Like in your process of growing up, you experienced a deep pain from the people you trusted, whether at home, in church, relatives, sexual abuse. Those are very deep personal pain points for each and every one of us. And unresolved bitterness or trauma often will distort your identity information. How you form as a person and what you think about yourself can be shaped by that unresolved bitterness. Meaning the bitterness causes you to think and to be inclined to think in a certain way. Because you see, personal pain has a lot of power because it is my own subjective experience. So nobody can actually take me out of my own personal subjective experience. It is mine. I went through it. I went through the pain. And because I went through the pain, I am most knowledgeable and familiar with my own story. Isn't it? And in most times of your own loneliness, your mind is likely to gravitate to have that as a root of bitterness that becomes a challenge for you. And so, the thoughts that help you interpret your pain and the things you tell yourself in your seasons of trauma and brokenness are very, very important. Very, very important. The stories you tell yourself, the narratives and the statements that are formed in your mind in the seasons of bitterness are very key. And hopefully we are going to come back on how to respond to that. One of the books that maybe I would point you to is the story of Jack Hill Perry, an American a black American girl who gives her own story of pain in her own upbringing. She'd written a book called Good God, Gay Girl, Good God. I think they are ordered the other way around. And she talks about her own story. We had reviewed that in this very publication, talking about how did that personal pain and the trauma of growing up contribute to the decisions that she later made. Again, I don't know how many of you guys have listened to one of the proponents of LGBTQ ideology here on this other part of the world called Kevin Mwachiro. Kevin again talks about his own story. He gives a talk on Engage. You know Engage, that is sponsored by Safaricom, where people come and give like a TED talk kind of thing. Very, very nice kind of talks because people talk about their own stories. And he shares his own story there and talks about his own pain and how that gravitated to what he is today. Now, because we are often retreating to our own arguments to justify the desires or the emotional experiences we are having, it is helpful for us to look at the scriptures and see how does scripture interpret for us what homosexuality is. Because at the end of the day, you will need to mirror that with all these different pathways. It could be one or multiple of them. Meaning if you grew up, maybe you could be watching pornography, which is a soft culture influence on you, and different kind of narratives coming in from the kind of movies that you watch, and at the same time you're going through pain. So you could be having like 3 or 4 pathways working in your life all at the same time. When they are compounded, they have such a strong, compelling thing in your heart, you actually believe it. The people who actually are living within their LGBTQ ideology, they are actually sincere. You know, sometimes we think that they are pretending. They are not pretending. A number of them are actually sincere. That's how they are feeling. But brethren, you can be sincere, but sincerely wrong. You can actually be sincere, but be sincerely wrong. You could be sincere, you're honest in terms of how you're feeling, but the interpretation of your emotions and feelings cannot be completely relied upon for decision. So let's turn to the book of Romans. I'm going to look at how Paul in the book of Romans, which is a text that many of us, and especially the LGBTQ community, does not like a lot. For the wrath of God is revealed, Romans chapter 1, verse 18. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men, who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Are you there? Romans 1, 18. Are you there? For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. So I want to identify 3 things that are given as a causation of the sin of homosexuality in Scripture. The first one is a suppression of truth. A suppression of truth. What does it mean to suppress truth? It means that you know it. You know truth. In fact, I'm shocked that in this text, Paul does not say that because the nations of the world have not heard the gospel, therefore they do not know God. No, he says no. That God has revealed himself in nature and in creation so that nobody has excuse. Can you imagine? No one has an excuse. That is a very strong claim, that nobody has an excuse. You may have a few of the facts and a few of your theological understanding a bit warped, but in your heart, God has made himself known to you, revealed himself to you so that he is knowable. However, man suppresses that truth. So the starting point is not sexual behavior. It is a suppression of truth. It is a denial of God. A suppression of God himself. So, sexual sin that later on morphs into LGBTQ ideology, it is not coming in just by the fact that we are talking about sexual behavior. We are talking about a suppression of truth. A person who refuses to accept the truth that is self-evident. And we are going to come back to that. And that is very, very profound for me to pick, because sometimes I used to imagine, no, maybe they do not know it, maybe if somebody educated them, I used to have that argument, but then scripture doesn't seem to support that kind of line of thinking. Because the Greek term for suppression is katecho, which means to hold down, to restrain, and to prevent something from actually taking its effectual purpose around you. In other words, I know something, but I am suppressing it. You're holding it down. You're refusing it to do its work in you. Because it is the truth that gives us, it is the truth that gives us liberty and gives us freedom. When we see that the means of the issue is not the lack of revelation, but a refusal to honor God and a refusal to acknowledge him and to give thanks to him. And that to me is a major one. So meaning they know, everyone knows. Everyone knows because God has made himself knowable to us. And then later on he reveals Jesus Christ so that then we can know the fullness of Christ in the fullness of time. And in his book is called, Don Richardson, talking about the book called The Peace Child, says that in every one of the cultures of the world, God has left a story that can easily connect with the gospel story. Easily for us to be able to explain the gospel story. And he gives in that book called The Peace Child, where this tribal group had a way of reconciling with a group that they had war with, that they would give them their own child. So that then, if you give your own child to the other community, then you form peace, because you will always remember our child is in the other community. So that is called a peace child. So you kind of give your own child to the other community, which is exactly what is exactly what God did. God gave us his own son and made reconciliation with us. Isn't that beautiful? And so in every culture, you will find a story that you can be able to explain the gospel. Why? Because God has actually made himself known to people. Number two is that later on, in the book of Romans, it explains in verse number 24, or maybe we can just carry on from where I left out, verse 22. Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images, resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. Therefore, God gave them up in the lusts of their hearts to impurity, to the dishonoring of their bodies among themselves, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie. Now, once you suppress the truth, it becomes a gradual downward spiral. And I listed quite a number of things that were named here. You dishonor God. Once you dishonor God, you become ungrateful. Once you become ungrateful, your thinking becomes futile. In other words, your thinking does not bear fruit. Then your heart becomes darkened. Then you start to claim to be wise when you are actually a fool. The next one becomes idolatry. Then you exchange the truth about God for created things. Now, I'm following the way that passage keeps talking about that downward spiral. If you read Romans chapter 1 from verse 18 downwards, you will see this kind of progression where the human being is becoming worse and worse and worse. Then at some point, God gives them over. So God removes the restraint of His grace that causes you to stop, to move in a certain evil path. You know, for all of us, it is by grace that we are still, like we are still restrained. Like humanity, we can be very evil. You know, we can be very, very evil. Even the evil you see right now that is making you so angry, it is still being restrained by God. Humanity has gone through very, very dark seasons of history where many unthinkable atrocities were committed, humans to other humans. Very gory stuff you cannot even imagine that humanity has capacity to do. So God restrains us. God restrains us. But a time comes when you have really gone down until God allows you and tells you, okay, do what you want. It's a dangerous thing for God to allow you now to have your own way. Because you've been suppressing truth for so long, God allows you to have your own way. So He says He gives them over to an unrestrained desires. So what happens? Immediately you start dishonoring the body. But notice that what first happens is that you gain a depraved mind, a debased mind. A debased mind is a mind that is morally defective. A mind that calls good evil and evil good. It is confused about right and wrong. A mind that cannot help you to discern and to evaluate good and evil correctly. A mind that is not functioning as it was originally designed. So it even becomes difficult to have a logical conversation with anyone who still holds on to LGBTQ ideology. Because their mind is already debased or depraved. It cannot function and argue on the same point. You know, I listened to many hours, like I think more than 200 hours of different videos when I was preparing to this session. One of the ones that I stumbled on is this story of a man called, I think it is in the Netherlands. I don't know that you guys have heard about the guy called Emil Ratelband. Have you heard about that story of Emil Ratelband? So Emil Ratelband was a 69-year-old gentleman. I don't know whether or not this is in the Netherlands. And he went to court to plead to change his age. And his plea was that he's been going to this dating site called Tinder. Okay, most of you guys probably may know that. I have no idea what that is. He's gone to this dating site called Tinder, and then he starts conversation with a girl, and then the girl likes him out of his vibe, okay? Then they plan to meet physically. Then the girl is shocked because the dude is 69. So he went to court to make a claim that he is being indiscriminated on account of his age. And so he wanted to make no, you guys are laughing. No, it is not a laughing matter. This was a matter that went to court. And he went and pleaded and said he would like to have his age changed to at least 49. Okay? So that he can legally be 49 even though he he is 69. And he had three things on his defense. He said, number one, when I went to see my doctor, he told me, you look 49. So he said to the judge, everybody tells me I look 49. Number two, he said, in this time, people are allowed to change their gender. What is so wrong if I change my age? What is much more permanent, age or gender? He said, age is a document that shows your age. He said, gender is a biological thing we can see. So if this guy tells me he's 14 years old, what other argument do you have against him? Apart from the fact that he can show you a birth certificate, which is a written document outside of him. Like there's nothing biologically that writes your age on your face. I don't know if you're getting, this guy had a serious argument. Then you're saying, this person is female. We can tell you are female. But our courts have allowed you to become male, and you're having to do, they're called conversion, surgical things, for you to become the other gender you want. Then the court was shocked. But let me tell you who are the people. Then he had that argument. His third argument was that, these people who want to change their gender don't know what they're asking. Because they have never been, if you're male, they have never been female before, isn't it? So then they don't know what they are. They don't know what they're asking. Me, I know what I'm asking. I have been 49 before. The LGBTQ community are the ones who came to oppose him in court. Because if he won that case, then their entire argument would have flown off. Because if the court allowed him to change the age on account of the fact that gender is much more knowable and age is not knowable, there's nothing that can be certified or empirically seen so that we can know you are this particular age. Like now, look at the person next to you. How old do you think they are? If they don't tell you, how do you think they are? How old do they look? Now look at them again. Are they male or female? Which one is easier to know? Yeah, so Emil Rattleband has a very serious argument, isn't it? So would you have allowed him to change his age? And so what happens is that it presents a huge challenge. And when you're having a society that has been being led by people of a depraved mind, we start behaving in ways that are shocking. During the interviews of one of the Americans' Supreme Court judge, she was asked, what is a woman? What is? Have you watched that video? I mean, it looks absurd. She was asked, what is a woman? She said, I don't know. I cannot define because I'm not a biologist. I had the clip. I would have played for you the clip. She says, I'm not a biologist. It's like someone asking you, what is 2 plus 2? No, in this context, I can't say it because I am not a mathematician. I will allow the mathematicians who have authority, who have studied math, to come and tell us what 2 plus 2 is. It's absurdity. It's absurdity because when you have a depraved mind, nothing makes sense. You start pushing arguments that are clearly wrong, but you have such confidence that even us who know the right thing start doubting whether we are thinking properly. Because even me, I wondered, by the way, what is a woman? Do I know what is a woman? And there's an entire documentary done by Matt Walsh asking different Americans that simple question, what is a woman? And many Americans no longer know what is a woman. Something that I was taught in class 1. We were drawing man, Mr. Kamau, Mrs. Kamau. But Americans today, majority of them in that, just go watch that documentary. It is actually a sorry state that we are in. And that means that when you are led by people with a depraved mind, you start responding in ways that are way lower. And you make things that are so obvious, complicated, and controversial when they are not. The third thing that, as an interpretation of Romans chapter 1, is that in verse 28, verse 26, it says, "For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions, for their women exchanged natural relations to those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty for their error." What it means is this. Oh, it has finally worked. When we are coming to the close, so you won't see all my work. I labored for like a whole week. Probably we might. Oh, where has it gone again? Oh, you've moved it to another machine. So the other one is the fact that in the book of Romans, it interprets that belief in that ideology to be a judgment itself. Did you read with me that they received the due penalty? The due penalty means you are already being punished for holding the thought. In other words, think about it this way, for those of us who are computer programming thinking, but the programmers would really understand this very easily. When you have a software and somebody starts playing around with your software, isn't it? What do? Then because you're wise, you look at them. You can see what they are trying to do because from your end, you're watching how they are moving around your software. And you're telling them, leave my software alone. Use it as is. If you don't like it, go get yours. Then they continue misusing your software. Then you decide you corrupt the software so that it starts harming them. And in a sense, it says this: when men commit shameless acts with other men, they are receiving due penalty. Oh, thank you for working so hard. Having a corrupted mind, a debased mind, a depraved mind, not only gets sexuality wrong, but it gets everything else wrong. Do you see the danger of that? When God leaves you to your own, to actually fulfill the desires you want. Because down there, when it's coming to the finish, it says, because they did not see fit to acknowledge God, in verse 28, God gave them up to a debased mind to do what ought not to be done. They were filled with all manner of unrighteousness. So it's like you open a whole doorway to all different kinds of unrighteousness. You cosanna with your parents, because it says there, they become disobedient to the parents. Murder, envy. There's a lot of killings and homicide within the LGBTQ community. There are serious mental health issues because of cognitive dissonance. You know what is cognitive dissonance? When what is happening in your life and the truth you know in your conscience are not aligning. When what you believe and what is happening around you becomes confusing for you. That's partly why there's a serious growth of mental health issues in the world. In fact, I think one of my friends, Ernest Wamboy, who could probably have been more competent in this subject than myself, talks about a research done, I think, in Sweden, where there are lots of freedoms for the LGBTQ community, and they expected that there would be now no more mental health issues, because before they said it is because they are being persecuted. But now in the country where they have the most freedoms of LGBTQ ideology, they also have very high mental health issues. Why? Because the way God has built you and the way you're living, when they are inconsistent, your conscience tells you and disturbs you. When you continue suppressing it, your mind cannot hold it. When you are speaking proudly in public, something internally that is against your nature, your mind feels confused. And that starts bringing you great depression of mind because of those inconsistencies. When you watch naked people, because this opens you up, you lie to your own friends, shame overwhelms you, all different kinds of unrighteousness now flood your life. Now, allow me, I think I need now to finish, and I can't see my last notes. Oh, I need to open this one. How do we then respond as we come to a close? Could you help me open this up? Or maybe I have managed. It's okay, I've managed to open that. So in 2 Corinthians 10:5, we are told that we are destroying sophisticated arguments and every exalted and proud idea that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we are making everything to come to the submission of Christ. And that's our calling. So when we are having a response to the LGBTQ ideology that you might find in your Christian union, it is for you to use God's power to break down those arguments one by one and to bring all of it under obedience to Christ. Okay? Unpacking every one of those arguments. Now, I did another video because I spoke during the training of STEMers, and there's a video online on Timazi Africa. I don't know whether it's on Timazi Africa, on moral relativism, where I used a TED video, the TED talk of a lady known as Njeri McKenna. How many of you know Njeri McKenna? She's an LGBTQ activist out of this country. She's a gifted, I think, fashion designer or something. Fashion and beauty. And so I use her as a case study. So we listen to the TED talk, and in that video we listen to the TED talk, and we respond to every one of her arguments and the way she makes, the way she talks. And one of the things that I'm going to give you 3 things, and then we are done. What am I supposed to finish, Chanel? 12:45. I have like 5 minutes to go. So let me try to run through this, and then we will walk through this if time comes. Number 1 is to define words and phrases. Because this is an ideological war, language is what creates common meaning. Do not go into an argument with someone using the same words, imagining you're saying the same thing. For instance, you will hear them saying, love is love. Have you heard that phrase? Love is love. Why are you denying me to love who I want? So you first must ask them, by the way, what is love? What do you mean by love? What do you understand by love? They probably could be making an argument for how they are feeling, and then you need to give them a proper definition of love. Sometimes you may hear them say, oh, that may be true for you, but it is not true for me. And say, truth is relative. They're like, really? Is truth relative? In fact, Ernest Wamboye, in his book, Unmasking LGBTQ, which will be available on the stands there, and you can get a copy. I think it's one of the best things I have read on the subject. And he says that when they were having this discussion on TV, he asked the person, is that an absolute statement you're saying that truth is relative? Then the other person posts and says, what do you mean? And says, yes, you have just told us that truth is relative. Is that an absolute statement? Then they thought, and then they realized they have committed the what? It's called the logical fallacy. Then they have tied themselves in, because if they say it is absolute, then it applies to everyone. Truth is true everywhere to everyone. If it is not true, then that is not truth. That's an opinion. Okay? And since it is an ideological war, you would want to define words, including very simple words like woman. Ask them, what do you understand? What is a woman? They'll tell you, no, gender is different from sex. And they use words and say that we are going to do gender reveal. Do we reveal gender? Do we assign gender, or we discover gender? Dr. Wahomengare said, he's the gynecologist, obstetrician, he said that when a child is born, they don't show the mother the face. They first show the mother the genitals. It is a baby boy or it is a baby girl. So they are not assigning gender, they are discovering the gender because it has been assigned elsewhere. Then later on, the mother can look at the face, isn't it? Because your first answer, is it a boy or a girl? Sometimes you may hear say, this is a human rights issue. Human rights for who? What do you understand by human rights? All these different words could actually be meaning different things for different parties. And language is what helps us to first have a common ground before we can discuss anything. And before you move on a lot in the conversation, define every word. Define every word. And have a common ground for having the argument. Number two is that uncover underlying personal hurts. Try to understand which pathway led them to where they are. In fact, Ernest Wamboe goes ahead and talks about the different kinds of people, because depending on your pathway, I think you're doing a good job. Depending on the pathway, it depends on whether this was something you were experimenting with, you were abused, you were hurt, and so if that was your pathway, then I need to be empathetic towards you and what happened towards you and help you come out of your root of bitterness and find mercy, forgiveness, and grace in Christ Jesus. However, you might find there are some who are sinister. They've already gained a depraved mind, and therefore they are now even being arrogant and violent about what they are thinking. And being able to separate what are the issues. Because if they are personal hurts, what I need to deal with is that pain and that bitterness. And to welcome them to a place where they can be received. One of my favorite passages in Scripture is Jesus' conversation with the Samaritan woman. It is a profound, I use that text a lot. I love it. The Samaritan woman is having a conversation with Jesus about water. Give me water to drink. Then Jesus says, the woman says, I don't have. So then after that, he says, you are a Jew. So she immediately introduces her own stereotype and says, Jews don't have dealings with Samaritans. So the conversation goes, and then it goes into religion. And says, okay, you guys, you say that we should worship in the temple. Us guys, we worship in the mountain. Then Jesus turns the tables on her and understands how come she is where she is. The argument is a facade that she is using to avoid walking to the path of her deeper longings. So she says, go come with your husband. Hey, you haina come back. It has not come back. Because now she's wondering, who are you who knows my deeper issues, from which now I form all these theological debates in a way to hide what I am struggling with deep within. And the woman gets caught by Jesus, and she says, you are a prophet. So one of the things I want to pray for you as you engage with other students on campus is to pray for spiritual power of discernment. The spiritual gift of discernment, because sometimes you may be having a conversation and you desperately need to know, where is this person coming from? Why are they asking the questions they are asking? And sometimes when you don't know the full story, you may be just being taken through rabbit holes. Arguments that are here, there, stereotypes now. You talk about this, you talk about that, until God allows you to see, this is the issue. This is the pathway. This is probably where they are paining. And when Jesus reveals her thirst for true intimacy and her longing for satisfaction, uncovering her deeper brokenness, and then revealing to her that through those multiple divorces, she was not a prostitute. You know, she was not a prostitute. She had been married 5 times. She's married, that marriage does not work, goes into another marriage, goes into another marriage. It means that she's looking for something that is not satisfying her. Then Jesus tells you, I am the living water. If you drink of me, you will never thirst. And so, the sexual desires and escapades are a decoy of a longing of the soul. So it's not just the fact that you want them to become from LGBTQ to become heterosexual. No, we are moving them from their ideologies to find full satisfaction in Christ. Praise the Lord. The last one is that not only do you uncover what are some of the things, it is to ask and move it, even though you believe what you believe, help them to see and take their argument to its conclusive end. And ask, it is not only enough for it to be true, but is it good for humanity? One of my friends asked me, as we were having this conversation at another setup, and says this, even when an LGBTQ ideology affirming person walks to a same-sex relationship, they still have to create male and female. Even when they have gone to same gender, one has to still become male, or rather function as the male and still the other one. So they are trying to replicate the same model. Think about it. They don't get 2 left shoes. They still create. They still attempt to create a duplication of the same model of where they left. They are not able to sustain relationships for long. Think about it. That many people who have suffered like many STIs, AIDS, monkeypox, there's a lot of immorality within the LGBTQ community. You would imagine that they would have something better to say, okay, fine, you guys heterosexuals, I know you struggle with your sinfulness, but us, we are expressing a monogamous relationship that we are faithful to each other and we have been married for 60 years. It doesn't happen. It still leads to brokenness. So it is still not good for humanity. Even if you don't agree with the argument whether it is true, it is also still not good for humanity. If we do not get children, because children is one of the outcomes of a good sexual intimacy. You should get into a sexual intimacy knowing a child can come. Isn't it? Yeah, you shouldn't get into sexual intimacy if you are afraid a child can come. You did not get me. Because here I'm speaking to you also. You should not get into a sexual intimacy situation if you are afraid a child may come. Those who are ready for sexual intimacy are those who are ready that even if a child is born out of this enjoyment, it is holiness and righteousness. Are we together? Yes. So you need to demonstrate the absurdity of their thinking when you push their arguments to their conclusive end. Not to show them whether it is true or false, but to show them that even if you guys had your way, Whatever you are asking for is not good for society. It is not a beautiful thing. You know? And then, as I conclude, is that God desires that we would take our... I've spoken for so long. Oops, yes. You need to take them back to the Creator's original design for human sexuality. This is my last point. From Matthew chapter 19, where Jesus is asked by his disciples, can you divorce your wife for any and every reason? What they were asking for is freedom to abandon your wife and abandon the relationship. Now, Jesus says this, from the beginning, it was not like so. Because he who created them male and female. And said, therefore, a man shall leave his father and... What is the therefore meaning? What is the statement that has come before the therefore? Why do people get married? According to Matthew 19. You can open your Bibles. Matthew 19, this is the concluding thing. We just affirm the biblical design for human sexuality and then we are done. I'm so sorry if I don't pick any questions. I feel terrible. We normally say that during weddings, isn't it? Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother. So what is the therefore? Look for this. Huh? 19 should be verse 2, 3, where the... Yes. Yes, why does a man leave his father and mother to be joined to his wife? You see, it says, therefore, a man shall leave the father and... In English, that is called a what? What is therefore? Conjunction. So the argument is made before the conjunction. Because based on the former argument, then a man shall leave his father and... So what is the statement before the conjunction? So why do we get married? Because we are male and female. We don't get married because we love each other. We get married because we are male and female. That's why marriage exists. It doesn't say because he loved her so much, the man shall leave his father and... No, it says, he who created them from the beginning, created them male and female. Therefore, if you guys have done English. So you've done English. So you must keep consistent with the first statement, the premise for you to see the proposition, isn't it? It says because the creator who is the designer made them male and female. Meaning, even if my wife was a loving person and I would keep a wonderful company with her, I like her stories, and she was not female, we would not have been married. I mean, I may love her the way, like my sister, I like my sister. Don't you like your siblings? But you can't marry them. So the basis, before you come to the issue of love, love builds on male and female. So that's number one. Number two is relational intimacy. Unlike all other creatures within God's creation, our intimacy is relational. Our sexual intimacy is not mating. We make love. Isn't it? We don't mate. In other words, we don't sleep with, I don't know how to say it, in a way that is honorable in this context. We don't do it like chicken do. Like, a cock does not ask the hen, how are you? What's your name? Where are you from? What's your sister's name? Can I know you? What do you like? What would you like to do with life? The cock does not matter what the chicken is, where it came from. As long as it's female, the cock jumps on it, isn't it? Now that's animals. Humans, we are different. We walk a long path of knowing one another, of trusting each other, of developing a friendship and bond before we can move into sexual intimacy. Because we are not what? Chicken. Please tell your friend, we are not chicken. Number 3 is that a covenant relationship would precede sexual intimacy. Because of the depth of the intimacy that God has created for us, it must be undergirded by a covenant relationship. In other words, I'm going to open to you and be naked to you, then I need to trust you completely. And there is no way to trust you completely so that I can be naked before you. I have to first have a covenant with you so that I can undress. The covenant safeguards you from the emotional exploitation. It is because you're giving me your deepest of self, and they were naked and not ashamed. Before I can undress completely, please give me a covenant to know that you will not run away after you see me. Then number 4, the sexual intimacy is enjoyed in a monogamous covenant relationship. Remember, we are building on this. Looking at human sexuality, you're building it. It's a male and female. It's relational. It is covenant. It is monogamous covenant. Okay? Then procreation in the context of a healthy union. In other words, we are not afraid if a child is born. Okay? And the last one, it is not only monogamous, but it is intended for life. And that is a question the Pharisees were bringing. Can I divorce my wife for any and every reason? And says, no. The Creator who created them from the beginning said, I have now made them one. They are no longer two. They are one. Let not man separate what God has joined together. And what else has God done? God has also created male and God has created female. So separation is in the realm of the Creator, not in the realm of the created. Because you have no power of creating male and no power of creating female, you also do not have power of separating. Then the disciples, when they heard that and understood this, they say, where? If that is a matter about marriage, what I kai. And so we need to paint the glorious, beautiful design of God for sexuality, even for those that probably hold a different argument. Not only not to show them that they are wrong, also to show them, look at the beauty of what you're missing. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.